Are there things that you found effective, like when you were in a, very stressful situation, say that there's like panic in the room and, maybe people are thinking about, their own companies where like there's bad news, some bad things are happening. Maybe people are leaving the company. Maybe they lost a major deal, maybe something like that
Yeah,
happened. And,
yeah.
and you can kind of just see the stress in the room. Are there, things that you've learned or thought about to turn this situation around and like get people out of,
Yeah.
panic mode and into let's fix this mode?
And it's hard to do, right? I mean, it takes, I think, for a lot of people, practice and experience. But the biggest thing is just to take a second. I mean, take a breath. Literally, that sometimes that's all it takes. Just take a breath. Don't respond immediately. Take, if you can, take 2 or 3 minutes, do some deep breathing. But responding too quickly tends to build momentum in that direction and start to add to the panic. So just take a second. A lot of times in the military, we'll say the first report is always wrong anyway. So don't react and add to panic on the first report. Take a second, start asking questions, start listening, and then keep your composure, and that keeps everybody else from adding to the panic. I
So,
think that's probably the biggest thing is just take a second. There's some
so,
other things about trying to, in your mind, zoom out and try to see a bigger picture, because when you're in that kind of stressful situation, it seems all encompassing. But in reality, it's a sliver of, the broader context of the environment. So if you can back yourself out and try to really look at the bigger picture, it can help you deal with that stressful situation by putting it in context. And then when you have that time, so if you're taking, whether the time is a breath or a minute or an hour, relying on those relationships, those trustful relationships, really helps. So you get this stressful information. Who's the person that you have a relationship that you can talk with about it before you start reacting in a way that might not be helpful. It might be something that works for you. It might be someone that's a peer. It might just be a mentor, not even the organization. But if you can touch base with someone that you have that relationship with, that's tremendously helpful.
yeah. And so you use this phrase where you said in the military, you say first report is always wrong anyways. Maybe can you elaborate on that? That sounds super interesting.
Well, it's just, I think history, I guess we talk about that in the military because in combat, there's just so much chaos and confusion. It just normally turns out that the first report is wrong. And so when you get that first report, it's usually most effective to ask for more information. I mean, maybe you start making a tentative plan, but not to just react too quickly, because as you get more information, it will probably look a little bit different than whatever that first report is. And sometimes it can be drastically different.
Yeah, I love that. That's so true. So true in business as well. So yeah, I really like that. And so, along these lines of, stress management, there's also pressure to produce, right? So what do you coach you coach a lot of leaders who obviously have a lot of pressure to produce, and in turn they may turn around and create that same pressure for their teams.
Yeah.
Like, when does pressure work and when does it not work as a motivating factor?
Well, I think the pressure to produce is one of the two things that makes leadership so difficult. That's what leaders are put in position to achieve some kind of result. If you get the bare bones foundation of what is leadership, it's about taking a group of people and producing some kind of result. So leaders, you can feel like Atlas holding the world on your shoulders. You're trying to produce whatever that result is. There's an expectation you're going to do it. That's what you're getting paid for. And that creates the pressure, the stress, and people just react differently under stress. And I think that's why, you can take somebody who's a toxic leader that to create a really negative environment, and you ask them, what are important leadership traits? And they can probably give you a great list. They'll talk about being empathetic and communicating clearly and listening, right? But that's not what they do. And the reason they don't do it is because they feel that pressure to produce. It's also why you can meet someone in a social environment and you're like, oh, this person's great. I'd love to work with them. And then you talk to someone who actually works for them. You're like, no way, that person's awful, because they're different in the social environment. When they're actually under the pressure to produce. And so to me, the takeaway from that is leaders need to have a feedback loop. They need a way to know when their behavior is different from those leadership traits that we all know to be good. They need someone that will tell them, or a system to find out that, hey, you may think that you're, holding high standards, but you're actually driving everybody crazy and making them afraid to, ask a question. You need to find that out as a leader and have a way. It's like the emperor with no clothes. You need a way for someone to tell you you're not wearing any pants.
And what are effective ways? Is it obviously, building trust with some certain individuals who can just tell you as it is? Is it surveys? Yeah. How do you think about that?
I think really it's the two biggest I think you hit on right there. One, I think every organization should do some kind of survey at least once a year. You don't want to overdo them because people get sick of filling them out and then they don't provide you good input, but at least once a year, because that will give you a sense. The problem with that is it's a trailing indicator. Someone might identify a problem and they might be enduring it for 9 months before you actually find out. The way to have a leading indicator is what you just alluded to, is having this environment where someone will come in and be candid with you and tell you that there's a problem or that, they perceive an issue. And it's not about having an open door policy. It's about having someone feel comfortable to be vulnerable and come in there and actually share what they think. A test I like to use to see if that environment is there is to think about, if you're in a leadership position, when's the last time somebody told you were wrong or disagreed with you?
Yeah.
Because if they haven't, either you're the smartest person in the world or they don't feel comfortable telling you that they disagree with you or that they're wrong. And if that's the case, then okay, now I'm identifying there's some behavior challenges here. I'm doing something that's meaning people can't be candid with me. They can't disagree with me. They can't tell me when they have another idea. So I've got to figure out what I'm doing that's making people feel that way.